Hey, my name's Clay Stockton. I'm part of the small volunteer army that it takes to put this event on. Every once in a while, if I cry long enough, they allow me to be in front of a microphone. So thank you. First, let me introduce this very handsome bearded man, Christopher Childers. I almost got it wrong, Chris. A poet, classicist, and translator in any order that you like, whose 14-year labor of love, the Penguin Book of Greek and Latin lyric verse, has been called, quote, a contribution to world letters that is nearly impossible to overstate, a lifetime achievement, and an act of inspired and enlightening lunacy. Now, why lunacy? Chris translated nearly the entire body of lyric poetry from the Greek and Roman antiquities, spanning nearly 1,000 years in 2 languages, many more dialects, as written by dozens upon dozens of poets responding to their own local events, all rendered in immaculate English formal verse. It's a work of staggering erudition, ambition, and skill. And in his spare time, Chris is an accomplished poet in his own right, who's been recognized by inclusion in the latest Best American Poetry anthology, as well as the Yale Review, the Kenyon Review, Agni, and others. Joining him, giving very strong Meryl Streep vibes, is Annie Finch, a prolific poet, translator, speaker, teacher, and, as you'll all get to experience very shortly, a ceremonialist and performer. Her work, which spans at least 7 books of poetry, unless she wrote one over lunch, and literally dozens of books on poetry, either edited, translated, or personally written, centers on feminism and on earth-based spirituality. Acknowledged as a, quote, central figure in contemporary poetry, reviewers have also observed that Annie is, quote, more shaman than formalist, and that her work shows how rhyme and meter aren't just a formerly fashionable sort of bondage, but a bioacoustic key to memory and emotion. Also here, yeah, woot. Also here today, the dashingly beautiful man in the great shirt, Randall Mann. Yeah, I hit on him. It's some part of my shtick, it's fine. Author of 6 books of poetry, including a volume of new and selected work called Deal, now available at our festival bookshop. He's a respected and sought-out critic, a teacher in Bennington College's low-res MFA, and one of the most prominent practitioners of poetry writing today. Just so happens much of that in traditional form. Poetry Magazine has praised his application of form to subjects like, quote, the patterns and poses of gay sociality, hanky code and hookup culture, haute couture and exquisite smut. Which isn't to say there's nothing in his oeuvre for the whole family. Those who attended last year's festival would have heard one of our Poetry Out Loud students recite his heartbreaking Sestina, a mortician in San Francisco. Finally, guiding this evening's conversation is Nevada County's own very beloved Maxima Kahn, no stranger to you, no stranger to this stage. Poet, teacher, dancer, and today, steadfast interlocutor. Maxima is the author of Fierce Aria, a stirring volume of poems that led Indigo Moore to call her, quote, an anarchist wrapped in the lyrical spirituality of Rumi. That might be the best personal makeup you could have to guide this conversation into form and line, memory and ink, hope and history. Please join me in welcoming Maxima and our esteemed guests.
I have to ask a practical question first. I noticed that we are about 15 minutes behind schedule. I assume I'm not intended to cut the conversation short.
No, we have built-in room.
We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm delighted to bring these 3 remarkable humans, scholars and poets and poetry lovers to you all. We're going to be talking a lot about form and meter in poetry, among other things. So I want to start with some basic definitions. I'm wondering, Randall, if you could start us off with just briefly, what do we mean when we say formal poetry?
So is this on? Okay. Well, I can only speak for myself. Sorry, still recovering from clay. I feel somehow both lifted up and trolled at the same time. But that's fine. I'm sure that's by design. So when I think of form, I just think of the shape of what it is that I would like to say. I think, for me, ideas of form, saying the word form or formalism can, for me, and I only speak for myself, it can feel somewhat of an alienating designation because it seems like there's some sort of like person with a measuring stick sort of like looking over one's shoulder when one says form. And for me, I just think of, I think of it in terms of architecture. Like what's the ideal architecture for what it is that I might want to say? Or even more to the point, what is the architecture that is going to be revealed as I start to think about what it is that I want to say? So I don't believe in lording over a poem. I believe in getting into the making and allowing the poem to declare to me, if I'm listening, the best possible path for it. Because I do not believe there is a designation between form and content. I only believe in the poem. So that's how I would define it.
And I'm wondering if, Annie, you can tell us what is meter and why should we care about it?
Wow. I was just going to see if Catherine has a copy of my book, Spells. If you would bring it up, I would appreciate it because it's sold. Okay, so wow. Meter, what is meter and why should we care about it is one of my favorite questions in the world. Meter it comes from a word that means counting, but it is also related to a Proto-European word that means magic, the word ana, power, and it is the most primal, original way of creating magic out of language, far before writing. It's a very body experience of language transmuted through the alchemy of the rhythms of the body into something that can create altered states of consciousness. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about meter nowadays. A lot of people tend to think it's something you can do wrong or right, or there's rules. It is actually, in the experience of myself and all the people that I have been teaching this with passion for quite a while now, it's a way of liberating the rhythms of your own body into a more cosmic space where they can have a much bigger impact on the language, on yourself, on your listeners. It's a way of exponentially increasing the energetic frequency of language. And the key to making the difference between that kind of limited, I got it right, I got it wrong, rules, fuck it all, the difference between that and like, wow, cosmological exponential enhancement of rhythm is simply this one principle of metrical diversity. That in English right now, we've been taught that there's only one meter that matters, which is iambic. This is the meter of imperialism, of patriarchy, of the elite, of education, of the page. And when you open it up into the way cultures that are oral and matriarchally based and more earth-centered, they don't ever have one meter. They've got multiplicities of meters. No coincidence, they also have multiplicities of goddesses and instead of just one god. It's an entirely different mindset when you open into different rhythms and different meters, and then you see that there are infinite options rhythmically. So you can't just define it nowadays, you also have to kind of correct for the stereotype.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Christopher, I'm wondering if you could speak to the relationship between songwriting and metrical poetry, and a little bit about some of the settings and uses of ancient metrical poetry where we would have found it.
Sure, yeah. Well, I suppose maybe I'll start by noting that a lot of the fear that people might feel when they think about meter is the fault of the Greeks, because all of our metrical terms are sort of intimidating Greek words. But when we think about iambic being an obvious example, hexameter, the word meter itself is ultimately from Greek. Within the archaic period, which is where my translation starts, we really found what scholars called a song culture. The word lyric itself, and lyric poetry, comes from the lyre. So lyric poetry is specifically the genre of poetry that was composed for accompaniment to the lyre, though there were other instruments, a kind of guitar-like cithara, the aulos, a kind of double reed pipe, sort of like an oboe. And those instruments were fitted to different kinds of genres of poetry. Each of those those genres had their own specific kinds of stanzas, kinds of metrical rhythms, and they had their own performance contexts, places where certain kinds of songs may have been more suited to praise of the gods, others to the symposium, the after-dinner drinking party, or kinds of public civic celebrations. And so what the meters in these poems are a kind of fossil record of the original performance context, which fairly quickly fell away to the point that even, say, classical Greeks or Hellenistic Greeks who gathered and collated these poems into books might not have really fully understood. But what you're going to find is there's a kind of a ghost of a melody, perhaps a ghost of dance steps within certain kinds of choral poetry where particular rhythms would have been performed with the chorus moving this way or that way, and certain contexts in which those were appropriate. So even if the metrical terms feel intimidating to us, they come from very, very primal, public, performative contexts where the poems are composed for use and for communication and for the preservation of tradition. There's no, it's not an accident that the mother of the muses is Mnemosyne, whose name means memory.
Wonderful. Last night I had the great pleasure of having dinner with these three poets, and at dessert I asked Christopher if he could recite from memory from his book a feast poem, and you gave us this delightful poem in the original and translation, and I'm wondering if you could do that again.
Sure. Well, this is a poem by Horace. It contains two of the most famous words in Latin. You'll recognize them when I get to them. Tu ne quaesieris, scire nefas, quem mihi, quem tibi, finem di dederint Laoconoe, nec Babylonios temptaris numeros, ut melius quicquid erit pati, seu pluris hiemes, seu tribuit Jupiter ultima, quae nunc oppositis debilitat pumicibus mare curenum. Sapias, vina liques, et spatio brevi spem longam resiges. Dum loquimur, fugerit in vida aetas, carpe diem, quam minimum credula postero. Don't ask. It's not for us to know what end the heavens will bestow on you and me, Luconoe. Ignore all that astrology from Babylon. It's better just to bow to what will be and must, whether Jupiter will send more winters or this one's the end that wears out the Etruscan sea against the rocks relentlessly. Be wise, have taste, let the wine decant, and prune back your extravagant hopes for forever. Life is brief. While we sit talking, time, that thief, escapes. Don't let your life delay until tomorrow. Pluck today.
It's so beautiful to hear the musicality of the original Greek and then the way you brought that musicality through in the translation. It's just such a beautiful example of, I think, the magic of meter. Annie, I know you call yourself a poetry witch, and you have this wonderful book of poems, Spells, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the relationship between poetry and witchcraft and spell making.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've been a lover of form and meter for a long time, And especially at the beginning, when I started out doing this in like the 80s and 90s, the formalist movement was very much dominated by some very conservative reactionary guys. And they wanted to go back to the 18th century. They were not feminists by any stretch. And I remember one time I was on this poetry listserv. We used to have listservs in those days. And somebody was like, people were talking about me like they didn't know I was on the list. They were like, I don't get Annie Finch. Like, she's such a progressive. She's such a feminist. How could she also be into poetic form? And then somebody said, I think she's a witch. And everybody was like, oh, now we get it. It's like there is a way. So, in fact, it all suddenly made sense. So I do feel that for me, the way I finished my PhD at Stanford on versification and meter, and I had always been obsessed with that. And at the same time, I was discovering feminist spirituality, goddesses, things like that. And I was always wondering, how can I be one person and have these bizarrely different interests? And the thing that finally brought them together was in my circles, we would cast earth spirituality circles for the equinoxes, the solstices, the full moons. We started calling on the directions. And when I hear words over and over, I get so frustrated when they're not crafted to the essence, I feel like finished. And when I teach, I don't ever feel like a poem is bad, it's just not finished. And so, it feels like a lot of the rituals that people were calling to call the directions, the language just wasn't finished, Spirit of the East, please bring us your clarity, blah, blah, blah. And I'd hear it over and over, and I just kind of, funny one day my husband was like, how come you've never made rituals, like spells in meter to call the directions? And I was like, oh my gosh. And I've been doing that ever since, like 30 years or whatever, I've been doing that. So, and through that process of experiencing the meters in practice, in ritual circles, I began to understand their power in practice among people who don't even necessarily like poetry, they think, but they feel the rhythm, they feel moved by it, like we just felt moved by what Chris was reciting. So, and then the more I learned about different cultures, you see that meters are used for ceremonial purposes in languages all around the world. And it's just, every shaman really is a poet of meter, and I think vice versa. So I used to feel that being a poet and a witch was like two identities that were separate, and increasingly I've just felt that it's really the same thing. That every poet has a witch in them, and every witch has a poet in them.
And would you give us a short spell of yours?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see. Well, here's one. You're going to hear it again, but turn me, touch me, heal me, change me, seasons of the turning year. Move me, make me, rearrange me, lead me home again here. Turn us, touch us, heal us, change us, seasons of the turning year. Move us, make us, rearrange us, move us back again home here. Turn them, touch them, heal them, change them, seasons of the turning year. Move them, make them, rearrange them, lead them home again here. So actually I have one more I just thought of. I'll do it again later. I have another for later, which is a little more of that angry kind. Might be useful right now.
Thank you. Randall, you've said that form helps you approach more comfortably the personal and helps you harden argument. And first of all, I want to know what you mean by harden argument, and then if you can, elaborate on how also it helps you more comfortably approach the personal.
Yeah, I just feel like sometimes, when I write, I'm very uncomfortable just approaching whatever it is that I want to write, just sort of plunking it down on the page. I feel like there's something so comforting about finding the path that's going to challenge the writing, that's going to put some tension on it. And I think that's sort of what I mean by harden it, sort of like ask something of what's being said and ask something of me as I'm writing it, because for me, it's not just enough to put the words on the page, but where, you heard the magic in these writers, where's the magic and where's the tension? And a lot of times that is things meaning being sort of like compressed into something that I couldn't see. So that's why, whenever I write, I always write in rhyme, because I only think in rhyme. I can't remember when I haven't written a poem without rhyme, because I find that for me, it provides a path, and also it reveals content for me as I think about where the sound might sound again. What happens for me is I sort of, if I take my hands off of the poem, because there's just a little bit of magic in that, right? Then the possibility of the next sound really provides a path for meaning. This is why I say there's no difference between form and content, because if I'm paying attention, if I'm in the midst of losing myself in the making, then things like sound and the music of the poem, they're going to reveal, in a way, the layers of what the poem is about, for lack of a better way of describing it. And so for me, it's this holistic exercise that is part me being incredibly present for something, and then part of me just letting go. I mean, it's just like, it's one more, like, life is aesthetics, aesthetics is life. There's no differentiation. There's no difference between form and content. There's no difference between anything. There's just existence. And I'm getting into your territory, Anne. There's sort of like there's just the trying to be present with, and trying to be open and present and rigorous, but letting go of the rigor. It's this dance. It's always this sort of beautiful dance. And, I think you have to give the gift a lot of space, because it's going to declare itself. And one has to be ready, but one can't overmanage it, because overmanaging anything, once again, in every facet of life, is not the path.
Yeah.
So
It's like you're listening to the poem to see where it wants to go.
Right.
And how does that help you approach difficult personal subjects?
Well, I mean, I really do. I just don't trust myself. Ultimately, if there's something that is particularly emotional or fraught, I don't trust necessarily my own emotional lack of distance to something.
Yeah.
So so for me, sometimes I'll make it almost as rigorous as possible to get to some kind of emotional truth. I think about, and I've seen poets whom I admire so much, really do this. Like when the great San Francisco poet Tom Gunn wrote about the AIDS crisis, he wrote it in a way that felt, you could feel almost like the distance in the pentameter, like lament. Your dying was a difficult enterprise. Even the word enterprise, there's like all of this distancing that the speaker is doing from the terror of what's happening. That whole, that part of The Man with Night Sweats where he talks about his friends who died, it's sort of like he's pushing away, hiding in plain sight with the metrical choices. And so for me, that's such a beautiful example. And he is using form to hold him. He's using diction and syntax to both push away and to bring closer. And I think that's it. That poet. There are lots of other poets like Seamus Heaney, other great poets, who are great models for me for doing that. And I find that I can find an emotional truth within, so much of it is about the paradoxes of writing. So I find much more emotional truth in this kind of like moving away from the heat of the emotion and really having it sort of like be under the surface, like the truth that hides in plain sight, where it's almost like something, it's like that Larkin poem, The Trees, it's like something almost being said, it's like that beautiful distancing. So
Yeah, nice. Can you give us a poem of yours that does that for you?
I can. I can. Let's see. I haven't read this poem out loud before, but my father passed away in January, and he had pancreatic cancer, and it was a tough last year, and so he died on January 2nd, and and so then in this poem, it just sort of captures sort of exactly what happened, but anyway, this is an elegy for my father. Fort Funston. I'm trying to get emotional here. Fort Funston. On January 1st, the day before he died, I sensed my father first. That day before he died, I walked along the shore, reluctant metaphor, more than just a shore. Mired in metaphor, beside the gulf I saw a scrawny winter tree. Approaching it, I saw, settled on that tree, a silent red-tailed hawk, like a chill on the mind. I watched him like a hawk until what came to mind was not a letting go, but something brushed away. I told him not to go, and then he flew away.
Beautiful. Thank you. Christopher, last night you shared this wonderful metaphor between courtship and formal poetry, and I'm wondering if you could share that with our audience.
Sure, yeah. I was paraphrasing an essay by John Crow Ransom called Forms and Citizens, where he draws some interesting little triangles where you're kind of here, and the thing you want to say is over here, and the form is over here. And his first, and going to the form and then going to the thing versus going straight to the thing. And one of the applications of that metaphor was the idea of courtship. And he was thinking of, say, a caveman sees a cave woman, bops her on the head in the cave, and that's that. The other one is the European drawing room. You know, you go, you sit, you get to know the family, you chit-chat, you have this whole kind of elaborate set of social rituals, and finally marriage, the marriage ritual, your whole family is there, and then you get to where the caveman got. And the benefit of going the long way around is that it becomes more meaningful, more powerful, a richer experience. It becomes invested with all of these other sort of personal and social meanings. You know her, she knows you, but and beyond that, you have a sense of what the sort of union kind of means. And whereas for the caveman, you know, just you know, goes on off. So that in that way, I would say that form to me is something that definitely does put a kind of impediment. It slows you down. It doesn't allow you to just put your first thoughts on paper. I tend not to believe the first thought is the best thought. Mine certainly aren't. I don't know, maybe some other people's are. But to kind of go the long way around when you finally get to where you're going, you know, not just I love you, but a beautiful poem that says I love you in a way that builds in a conceit that kind of deepens and enriches the experience and ends up catching something of your essence, something of the essence of the person you love. And that is comes from running it through the crucible of form.
Wonderful. Yeah. I want to touch on our theme this year of hope and history. Obviously, we're in a very challenging moment globally, politically, economically, ecologically, socially. And I'm wondering what formal poetry specifically, how does that help us in a moment like this? What can it give us? Annie, do you want to start us off?
Yes, everything. I truly feel that meter in particular, not just form, because meter is the part that really gets our body engaged, and at the same time our mind, our spirit. So wow, I have so much to say on this topic. I will try to be very intentional with how I put it. my sense as a feminist and a woman who wants the species to survive, and a woman who has spent a lot of time looking at the cutting-edge scholarship on matriarchy, on different ways of adjusting the society compared to what we have here that's gotten us to this mess. I truly feel that we need a total reset, a recalibration. Like what we have been doing obviously brought us to this, and it's really inevitable when you look at it. We need to go back to the roots and start over as human beings. Going back to 40,000 years ago, we were matriarchal species until 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago was when the Kurgan invasion came, and the raping of the women and the killing of the men, and everything changed, and the goddess societies of the West were destroyed. But 35,000 years we persisted as a species in a matriarchal way. So my sense of it is that by doing our jobs as poets as fully as we possibly can, we can come back to our humanity in a way that is not just an aesthetic choice or a decoration or, oh, I think I'll do it this way, I think I'll do it that way, I think I'll use this form. No, to me it is actually a calling that I feel lives in the heart of many poets, many poets. And you can tell because, like one of the student poems that I heard today from Poetry Out Loud, everyone was like, wow, that poem is amazing. I think it was the next to the last one. It ended. There's a very clear meter in that poem, and people hear it. It's like our ears perk up. We're like animals. We're like, oh, I hear that. We smell rhythm. We feel it. And if we can, as poets, cultivate and finish and fully inhabit the tools of what we've been given already, what we've been handed down by our ancestors, by the ones who survived for millennia. They survived because they had a connection with spirit and with earth and with community that was extremely sensitive and extremely powerful. And meter is that. It is that. We've all in this generation basically we haven't had the experience of learning meter properly. I went to colleges where I actually got it in an extremely thorough way, and I've been spending the rest of my life in my own poetry and in my teaching passing that along. And I really do this in a sense out of a feeling that this can make a gigantic difference. The English language is the most widespread language on this planet, and it's the widespread language of domination, of imperialism, of capitalism, of violence. And if the English language can fully inhabit itself rhythmically and metrically and begin to use the rhythms not only of the mind, which is what we have right now. I have a little system. Every meter has a kind of an aspect to it. The one we have right now, iambic, is the meter of the mind. There's also the heart, the spirit, the will, and the body, equally important, but in our culture, those things are just sort of in the mush, nobody even knows what they are. But if we can cultivate through meter as poets our sense of all of these different parts of human potential, I truly feel that we as poets who are literate in the dominant world language of English, which is really responsible for the mess that this planet is in, we will have the tools that are needed to make a significant shift. And so I don't think this is just an accident. I think this is like a major imperative, I would even say, for poets who are willing to step up and really learn what's in front of us. Like, all we can do is do our own job the best we possibly can. We can't really go out there and be ambassadors or generals or like economists or whatever. If we're poets, we're poets. But we can learn to do it the very best that we can. And meter is the elephant in the room. Meter is the thing that everyone's afraid to learn. They never learned it. They don't think it matters. They talk about subverting it and all this stuff. But you can't. How about instead just like being humble and like, okay, this is the art that I've been given. What's here? What can I learn? You'll be amazed.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, either of you can go first. Like, what is formal poetry or metrical poetry? How can it help us at a time like this? Or what does it have to say about this theme of hope and history?
Well, I'll just maybe try to not say that much, but I think of Adrian Rich's metaphor that form is a kind of asbestos gloves that you can use to handle material that might feel a little bit too hot otherwise. I also think of something that a professor of mine said in college who might have, I think was paraphrasing Coleridge maybe, that when you're focusing on meter and form, rhyme, things like this, it gives your conscious mind something to do while you write down what you didn't know you knew. So those are just a couple brief thoughts.
Yeah, and just a couple thoughts too. I mean, I will say that first, I think just making art is an act of subversion, and and I think that and it doesn't even need to be that it's sort of capital P political, because all poetry is political by its very nature, because to make art is the act of beauty and the act of hubris in a culture that is either mostly indifferent or actively against such acts is a deeply political act, and speaking truth is speaking truth to power. So it does not, whatever the subject matter, all art is quite useless. The Great Wild said. So it is at its sort of baseline. There's the part of the beauty of it is the lack of utility, but in that lack of utility, one finds the truth and the utility. It's just sort of like another paradox of writing. So I'd say that baseline there's that, and then when it comes to metrics and formalism, I think that it provides this sense and idea of order in a world of chaos, and I think that can be helpful if the poem is asking for it. Every poem asks for different things, so I'm not interested in dogma, I'm interested in the poem. And the second thing is that in metrical poems, one hears it and it's almost like this ancient music that the body knows. So sometimes if you have the click of a metrical couplet at the end of a poem, say, it just can feel so satisfying because it's like something that like you've always known, and so I think that there is something sort of ancient about the internalization of that musicality.
Yes.
So speaking of that ancient music, I just have to ask you, Christopher, if you'll give us another poem from the collection so we can hear some of that ancient music.
Sure. How about do some Sappho? I think I should be able to do this, but I'll open up to it. Hoi kilothron athanat Aphrodita, pai diostolaploke, lissomaise, me masaisi, me doniaisi damna potnia tumon, alla tuideltai pota caterota tassimas audasa eois pello eclues, patroste domon lipois crucioneltes, armupas deuxaisa, caloide sagonoce estrutoi perigas melainas, pucna dinintes terapora novite rostia mesoi, aipsa dexiconto, pseudomacaira, mediaisai satanatoi prosopoi, eire otti deute peponta, cotti deute caleni, cotti moe malista telogenestai mainolai tumoi. Tine deute peto apsagen eswan pilotata, tisof safa dicei, cae garai peuge tace ostioxe, aide dora me decet alla dosse, aide me pile tace ospilese coigeteloisa. El temoi cainun, calipande luson ec merimnan, osse demoe telesai cumos imere teleson, sudauta sumachos esso. O deathless Aphrodite, enthroned in glamour, wile weaver, Zeus's daughter, take my part, I pray, and do not yoke with pain and fever, lady, my heart. But come here now, if you ever heard my voice with a heedful ear when I called to you on high, and going from your father's golden house, came down the sky, charioted out of heaven in a hurry, through midair by a team of lovely sparrows. their wing beats whirring in a crowded flurry over the furrows. And there they were, and you, as a smile played on your immortal lips, O blessed one, you asked, what was the matter now? What made me call again? What was the main thing that my maniac heart hoped would happen? Sappho, what love or lust must I persuade this time to take you back, now who's unjust? For if she's running now, she will soon pursue. If she says no to gifts, she'll give them soon. And if she feels no love and refuses to, she'll change her tune. Appear to me now again. Release me from desire's stranglehold. Fulfill, provide all that my heart has hoped for. Goddess, come, fight at my side.
I think we're still asking that of the gods and goddesses, yeah. Last night we stumbled onto a wonderful conversation about the villanelle, and each of you has written in this fiercely challenging form, what I think of as a fiercely challenging form, and done it beautifully. And I'm wondering if you would each give us a villanelle of yours and maybe speak a little to how that form helped you give voice to that subject. Do you want to start us off, Randall?
Sure. Yeah, the villanelle's pretty devious, because you have these repeating lines, and there's very little room for forgiveness in it, because you have to continue to say things over and over again and make them mean somehow more, and provide the inertia in the poem to keep it going, and yet sort of reference back to what has come before. It's kind of like you have two repeating lines, and so it's like you get so much of the poem for free, and yet.
You gotta pay somewhere.
Yeah, you gotta pay. The ferryman's like rowing up. It's like, give me the coin. So, it's like, which villanelle? Last year was a bit of a villanelle run, which is like probably the nerdiest sentence ever uttered. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me. So, I thought, so we were at dinner and I was like, I thought I could remember this. And I was like, I don't know if I should read the Grindr villanelle to the audience. I mean, I just assume that all of you are on Grindr, but if you're not, it's fine. I know your phones are silenced, so you won't have to hear that noise. For the uninitiated, Grindr is a handy app where you can see the proximity of your neighborhood faces whom you might want to possibly have an assignation with. Delicate. I'm trying to be delicate. I'm feeling bad after all the magic that I've been hearing next to this one. So, okay. So I was on Grindr once. Not once, but there was this time that I was on Grindr. I can't believe this. This is. What am I doing with my life? And I'm like scrolling through, and then I come across this profile, and the header says, "If you can remember the Cold War, you're too old for me." So, yeah. So many apologies in advance. So that is the epigraph of the poem. Cold War. Because you're 22 and in your prime, you silently refuse to date or date. When war was cold, I had a lovely time. I messaged you and sent a shot of grime, then shot some more. It must have been too late. Because you're 22 and in your prime, perhaps. I'm shifting like a paradigm. And all the new assumptions formulate as if our war were cold. A lovely time. I'll exercise my stock internal rhyme. The currency is yours to circulate. I'm 49, my interest rate is prime. Suppose that poverty is not a crime. Suppose you more or less accommodate like war. When cold, we'll have a lovely time. Perhaps you'll click on me in wintertime. Proximity is constant. So is fate. Was I 22? Before my prime, the war was cold. I had a lovely time.
Christopher, if you could have some.
Sure. Let's see here. This is called Miasma. This is a COVID lockdown poem. And I don't really remember much about what I was thinking. Maybe that, I do admire very much villanelles that where the refrains are kind of, the syntax is broken or new meanings are found. But I also do kind of like ones that just keep the refrains as is and play them straight. So that is maybe what I was up to here. The plague's a lot more boring than I thought. I hide, I wait, I write polemic prose. Who knows what someone has or hasn't got? I avoid strangers, do as I was taught. The Wi-Fi's buffering, the laptop froze. The plague's a lot more boring than I thought. It's in a cough, a tasteless patch, a clot, or nothing, or a swelling of the toes. Who knows what someone has or hasn't got? Airplanes are grounded, slots untouched. The hot dates, the booze, the savings, it all goes. The plague's a lot more boring than I thought. My lying foes expose the lies I've bought. Liars. I hope they end up comatose. Who knows what someone has or hasn't got? Refrigerators sputter, bodies rot. We slump at screens, joints harden in the pose. The plague's a lot more boring than we thought. The things I used to live for, I do not. Abstraction breeds inside me. Feeling slows. Who knows what someone has or hasn't got? The plague's a lot more boring than I thought.
Fantastic. Annie, will you give us one?
Yes. Oh my goodness. There are two that I'm thinking about. This one, I did do an anthology of villanelles. I love the form ever since Carolyn Kaiser sent me one for a book. In 1993, I edited a book called A Formal Feeling Comes, which really exemplifies the idea of the asbestos gloves, I think, that form can allow you to approach topics that otherwise you couldn't. And Carolyn Kaiser, who was a great West Coast poet and a dear mentor and friend of mine, sent me a villanelle that I loved so much, and it started me on this lifelong love of villanelles that culminated in this anthology of villanelles. And there's one in there called Beach of Edges, which I love because it's an unusual meter. And I'll just read you the two lines, and then I'll read you the villanelle I'm really sharing with you. But a drift of snow edges a new drift of sand. Wet rocks yield to pebbles like opening hands. And when I was putting together the anthology, there were so few that were not in iambic. And this one came to me in another meter. So I wanted to just share it. Wet rocks yield to pebbles like opening hands. So if any of you are trying sonnets or villanelles, just remember sometimes you look it up and the definition will say a poem in iambic pentameter in 14 lines. Actually, that's not true. There's no form, very few, where the meter has to be iambic. So feel free to try others. Okay, so this is my villanelle that I'll share. This one is about a very difficult topic. And it's about being sexually molested as a child. And it was a poem that I wrote. It took about 12 years to finish it. And I didn't even know it was the villanelle for the first 7 years. It just sat there and it was really hard to revise. And all of a sudden, one day, looking at the same poem I looked at for so long, it was like, oh, it's a villanelle. And then it opened. And it doesn't use rhyme, it uses the same word, and it's identical rhyme, the same word repeats. A root. What happened when he grabbed me at the root? I stopped. It all stopped. Spirals fought to win my spiral life from an unspiraled root. From a thick cigar stubbed my young tongue's root, heart beating uncle lifetimes through my skin. What happened when he grabbed me at the root where women come to starve, our ready root? My broken body, one more, broken in. My spiral life from one unspiraled root-fed pomegranate in the basement. Root husked hell of seed, as if seed could have been what happened. When he grabbed me at the root, did ancestors throw chains down through our root to rot and winnow with their pain and sin my spiral life from an unspiraled root? Oh, sisters, keen our sisters, till the root of loving burns, but not from foreign kin. What happened when he grabbed me at the root? Our spiral life from an unspiraled root.
Thank you. So we just literally have 3 more minutes, which is tragic. Any last thoughts or words on form, meter, poetry, hope, history?
I just want to thank this conference for bringing us here to have this conversation. It's my life is built around this exact conversation, and I'm so grateful to be able to be part of it with you both, with you all, and to share these thoughts at this moment where it seems these ideas are possible life rafts to get us through this next mess that our culture and our planet is in and move us into something new.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to second that. It's a huge pleasure and honor to be here, and so great gratitude to the conference and to all of you. Thank you.
I feel the same. It's really fun to nerd out with other people who get it and don't want to just give you that look and say thank you. Check, please. So we're real special, and the other thing is that it's sort of like, I mean, we've devoted our lives to this, which is really beautiful. It's really beautiful to have this sense of purpose, the commitment to your projects and your whole life. It's something so beautiful about that. It's like it really is one of the most moving things about being an artist is this single-minded devotion. It's so touching, it's so I love that. And also, we talk about form and everything, but for me there's just such a strong sense of play and joy Like, I love being a poet, and I'm so excited. You know, I'm 53 years old, and I've been doing this since I was a child because I always knew I wanted to be a poet, and that's so magical. But I still get so excited when I can feel, my body can feel a poem coming on or an idea coming on. And this sense of joy and you know, there's no determinacy in it, there's no money in it, there's no glory in it. There's nothing. There's only the making. And that's so wonderful. And so I never want to get lost in the conversation the fact that it is a joy and a privilege and a gift to be able to, and I'm very rigorous and a little bit grumpy, but there's so much joy in doing the thing that I do. I want the words to be right, but there's so much joy in the making, because like, why the hell would anyone choose to do this if it weren't joyful? And so, I just feel like this is so important.
Yeah.
A word to that is so exactly spot on. I mean, I think the biggest thing that people don't get about form is how fucking fantastic it feels. It's so fun. It's so juicy.
Like, yes, I can get that.
So
I can do that
sexy.
Pantone. I can let the puzzle. I can make that puzzle. Fuck that Pantone.
I think it's actually a conspiracy to keep us away from the power
It is.
that we could.
More patriarchy.
Yes, it's like they're trying to stop us being powerful. It's like the power of pleasure.
So good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Huge thanks to Annie Finch and Chris Childers and Randall Mann. Thank you. And Maxima, beautifully done with these.